do want to introduce our speaker is John Dugan, Senior Risk Control Specialist here at Adventist Risk Management. John's joining us today from California. Welcome, John.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Well, I'm going to just let you go ahead, and I'll only interrupt if you have any really pressing questions. Otherwise, it's all you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Again, as David said, welcome to everyone who is here, and in some cases, good morning. In other cases, good afternoon. Let's get rolling with this. As many know, winter is coming. For some, winter has already actually hit. Um, and for many, it's sort of a case of it's expected. We know that we're going to have cold weather, so we're going to get prepared for that cold weather as needed to be. In most cases, sometimes it does slip on us early, and there is really a need to be prepared for this because the repercussions of not being prepared for cold weather can be devastating in a lot of ways, some of which we'll discuss as we move along. What are some of the benefits of winterization? Obviously, it prevents property damage. And when we get property damage, in many cases, we also end up with loss of use of that property for some time. So our activities may come to a screeching halt while some of that gets taken care of. There's also other things that come along, of course, with winterization issues, and when we have frozen pipes, say, that burst and we end up with water leaks, that also can lead to mold and other damage to the facility beyond what the initial phase was. We get utility savings. Some of the winterization process and what we can do in increasing our insulation and sealing drafts and things like that saves on utilities, and that's a big thing in this day and age with the price and cost of utilities. And of course, we enhance personnel safety. We've got visitors to our facilities, we've got our own employees or volunteers, and what we do with our sidewalks when it gets icy or wet and they become slippery is important. And it's important that we plan ahead to try and make sure that our facilities are safe when people arrive at them. Right here, I threw a couple of charts in to show some of the frequency and severity of some of the losses that we've had. Frequency, as you can see on the pie chart on the left, with 127, was the most frequent between 2009 and 2013. And then ice and snow damage, which could be usually from leakage that might occur because of ice and snow settling somewhere, or maybe it breaks some power lines or something else with the weight of it. And then there's collapse, of course, which happens when we get massive built up on roofs, and it doesn't, it just keeps building and building until it overcomes what the building's been designed for and it collapses. So we have to make sure that we've got removal processes in place for that. As you can see on the right, severity-wise, frozen pipes with over $3 million in damage between 9 and 13. Collapse, $2 million in damage, and the ice and snow damage at $1 million. And there's other things that would increase those numbers, but I used some of the data that was right on the just only dealing with frozen pipes and not dealing with, if you were to look at our water damage as a total, it's enormous, somewhere around $13 million in water damage. But that can also include flooding and other things like that, which I don't go into in this particular part. And here's where you might say, but I live in. And as I mentioned before, a deep freeze hits a large swath of the U.S. was on Fox News, 12/7/2013. Deadly winter storm kills at least 13 in the South. Yeah, they weren't expecting that. We don't usually get that down there, but indeed it was. Winter storm hits Atlanta harder than expected, 1/29/2014. I was actually working down in the South, and some of my work was in outdoor activities, and boy, it was just bitterly cold during that time this year. And then some of us have had an early hit. Look at the record early snowfall hit South Dakota, 9/12/2014, and everybody knows Denver has already had some snow. Wyoming got hammered. So these are the kind of things that we have to be ready for well in advance in some areas, and others it could come whether we expect it or not. Now we talk about being prepared in winterization, but in some ways it's really should be part of the year-round preventive maintenance program. How our systems work and what we do to help keep our buildings in shape are critical year-round. And as you can see in these pictures, there isn't much excuse to have a bush growing on top of an eave like this one is over the dock, the overhang. And this gutter, as you see in the picture on the left, with plants growing in it. Those gutters are not going to do the job they're intended for. The water will not flow away from the building. It's very likely it will back up, could go underneath the roofing materials, and then seep into the building and cause damage. When we have deficiencies like this, it's very important that we look at change. We have to develop a good preventive maintenance program and get in there and make sure that our gutters are cleaned. You know, during the fall, they're constantly filling with leaves. This picture in particular was not during the fall on the left there. In fact, neither was the one with the tree, but so they'd had plenty of time for this vegetation to grow because I was looking at it like in early summer. So start early and make sure you keep up with these kind of things on your property. Have we planned ahead for what can occur? We could very easily have power outages that will prevent us from being able to use our heaters, which can then lead to the frozen pipe issues. Um, so you know we may have to think seriously about a secondary power like generators or something to make sure that we can keep our buildings warm and not have the pipes freeze and break and then cause subsequent damage. Snow and ice removal, a lot of facilities will contract for it. If we do it internally, then we have to make sure at least that we have all of the proper melting materials available, shovels, people that are ready to respond when the storm hits, and get the sidewalks cleaned up so that we won't have the slips and falls and those kind of losses. Um, the easiest way is to contract. If you've got a dependable contractor who'll come in and make sure that your parking lots and walkways are clear come Sabbath for church, then your deacons aren't running around early trying to get that done and slipping and falling themselves before they finish it. And roofs, making sure we don't have that buildup of ice and snow on our roofs. That's a dangerous place to be. If you can contract it, that's the better way to go with it. Um, and there's some who will have the devices that are along the roof line that will help to melt it along the edge so that it doesn't build up as much behind it and create a dam. Roof protection is important. It will subsequently lead to a lot of leaks internally if we don't take care of our roofs. And when those winter storms hit, it'll seep in, or if there's winds involved with those storms, it'll tear things up. And as you can see with like the shingles on the right that are starting to lift, you start getting a lot of wind, those shingles are going to start lifting more and more, and eventually there'll be a whole patch of unprotected roof that can lead to a lot of damage. The little device that you see on the left is the kind that when buildings are designed, they should be designed to where strong winds can't lift roofing materials, and those kind of brackets are the kind that attach rafters and things to the sidewalls and make sure that that doesn't happen. And we talk about our maintenance. This is an actual picture I took in the field there with the tree laying across the roof line. It has already caused damage that could lead to leakage. And when we arrived, nothing I don't even think it was in a work order process to take care of that tree, but it definitely needed some, and then needed to get in and make the necessary repairs before they got rain or other things that could damage it. The eaves, with the eaves hanging down like that, good windstorm come in, that's going to be gone. Wind blowing rain and other wet stuff will just go in underneath that roof, and then you can end up with more internal damage. So what have we done to, seal these penetrations up? We need to properly take care of our building. Heating system maintenance is crucial. Make sure that we have that checked at least annually before the season starts, to where they're checking the equipment, looking at the chimneys, making sure that we clean those out, and the flues, getting out all the tars and and things out of those. And it's best if we have that done by a qualified licensed contractor. They know what to look for. They're in there identifying things that need to be taken care of before those winter storms hit, and they get it done. Temporary heating. We've had issues with that before. I know sometimes we don't have as good a heating as we may not as we may want in a facility. But so these may sometimes be necessary, and where they are, they are. But it's important when we do bring them in that we make sure that they're approved by a good underwriting body, UL or Factory Mutual, or some of the other companies that do the approval on these things. Make sure they've got tip over protection, especially these with the heating elements in them, to where when they fall over, they will automatically shut off. I've been in places where they still occasionally don't have that tip over protection. Those are really old heaters when they don't. You might consider the oil filled units. They don't work the same as the heating element types. They don't get quite as drastically hot, but they get warm enough to warm a room. I've used them. They work quite well. And you don't have quite as much of a worry over fire with them. Whatever is used, make sure you supervise that use, that wherever those heaters are set up, they're not near combustible items, that like trash cans. Sometimes people will put them under their desks, and where do they happen to have their trash cans occasionally? Under the desk. So we need to make sure that those are properly positioned away from anything that's combustible. And if there's flammables in the area, I'd suggest removing the flammables and get them stored somewhere in an adequate approved flammable storage cabinet. How we take care of our property. Again, we want to keep the outside outside, and we don't want to be letting all of these elements inside. As you can see here, broken windows, they went to an awful lot of trouble to try and make sure nobody would get cut on that glass, when what they should have done was just put the effort into replacing that painted glass, because you will get bad weather coming through that. It will lose heat. You can get water damage, and it's just going to continue to break more. So that those kind of things, look for broken glass, cracked glass, get it fixed. As you can see on the door on the right up there, there's a lot of light coming through that, which means we aren't getting a good seal. That is going to let warm air out, and it's going to let cold air in. So we need to make sure that we have a good fit with all of our doors. Make sure our window seals are in good condition and sealing properly. There are ways you can actually pressure check and blow particles around to see if there's leakage around windows and doors. Obviously, you didn't have to go very far to know they've got a problem here, and that problem needed to be fixed. So can we do? We can insulate our attics. Those are the easy ones. So, we can always blow in insulation into an attic area and increase the attic there. It's not as easy with walls to try and increase insulation in walls. But we can also wrap our plumbing and make sure that we insulate it with some. I mean, in the old days, we used to just use newspaper to wrap the plumbing, and then we'd put burlap around it, and then we wrap plastic around it and make sure we didn't compress it well. Well, nowadays, there's all kinds of extra things that we can use, regular good insulation for plumbing. And in some cases, they have electrical devices that you can wire that will help to keep the plumbing a little bit warm so that it doesn't freeze. There are precautions with that, and we have to make sure that we follow those precautions, as I mentioned in another slide, so that we don't end up with a fire. Our pipes, again, we need to make sure that we shut off our interior valves, make sure that there's not water between that and the outside, so that would freeze. Insulate your plumbing. Seal around gaps where the plumbing comes through. A lot of times in some facilities that's not sealed real well. Disconnect your outside hoses that can freeze and expand back into the pipe. So pull those loose. Heating tape is the electrical I was talking about a moment ago. And there's pros and cons with that. We have to make sure that it is certified and approved by the UL approval type companies, or Factory Mutual, or one of these there's Canadian approval companies too. And we need to make sure that we install it per the manufacturer's guidelines. Whatever they say, we need to be doing to do it. Otherwise, could result in overheating or fire or shorting out in some way. Inspect them yearly. Look to make sure there isn't any damage to them, that temperature and weather hasn't started to crack the materials or the wiring or something like that. And it's usually recommended that they be replaced after 3 years of use. Um, Obviously, if you see damage, replace them immediately. Exterior conditions. We mentioned earlier, again, the gutters, as you can see here, I repeated that picture. Make sure our gutters and drains are cleaned out and that we don't have leaves, twigs, debris, and other things in them. And in the fall, they're just going to fill up really fast with leaves, and we have to make sure that we keep those cleaned out. What's the condition of our roofs? You saw the picture earlier where some of the roofing was lifting up a little bit. Um, there's other types of roofs. There's flat roofs, and what's the condition of those? Are there cracks in the seals on those that may start leaking? What's the condition of our siding or awnings or anything like that can be caught in the wind and ripped loose and possibly blown through a window and cause a break? Any of those can result in further damage and wet walls or water through a broken window. Vacant buildings have resulted in a lot of damage, and in many cases, some of our buildings, even though we use them a lot, are vacant all week. They're vacant when those storms hit. There's ways we need to be prepared for that. If they're permanently vacant, and whatever we can do to try and reduce it. If we know we have a really bad cold spell coming, shut off the water. Don't let there be water-filled pipes throughout the facility that can freeze and break. Drain and blow them out. Now, draining, there's usually a low spot you can drain your plumbing from, but it helps to go that extra mile of blowing out the plumbing. I used to have a piece of property in Flagstaff, and I remember going there one winter, and I had drained all my piping out. And I learned the hard way about blowing out those little places where water can get trapped, and the importance of having air that blows that water out of those. Because as soon as I turned the water on to the double wide I had up there, it sort of sounded like a bit like a river flowing. There were numerous breaks in the lines, and it took some money and some major repairs to get that back up again. So I obviously did not stay there that particular weekend. Remove water from toilet tanks. As you can see in the picture on the right, if it gets cold enough in a facility, that water freezes, it's going to expand and it's going to burst. And then you're going to have more damage as the water thaws, once the water thaws out and continues to flow. Drain your water heaters in those facilities that you're leaving empty, and if the water heater is going to be shut down. And check them daily. Have somebody go out to the facility periodically and take a look to make sure everything is okay. It can be okay in one moment and bad the next, so it helps to periodically recheck the condition. Maintain warmth. That's an important part. Keep the inside of that facility warm so that we can keep the plumbing warm. If it's, the recommendation in many cases is 55 degrees Fahrenheit or 12.78 degrees Celsius. If it's poorly insulated building, you may have to set your heat a little bit higher to keep it going. Yes, you may have a little higher utility bill during that period, but trust me, that utility bill is going to be a lot lower than what you end up paying in deductibles and damage costs and loss of use and all the other things that go along with damage from frozen pipes. Open your interior room doors and cupboards so that warm air can kind of flow around and get into those cupboard spaces. And those doors, it's amazing how different the temperatures can be between the outer room and underneath that sink if that cupboard door is kept cold and closed. And by keeping it warm, it obviously prevents that dampness and mold buildup that you smell a lot in a lot of old facilities. The mildew that you can get, it'll help keep that down if you can keep that temperature warm in your facility. If worse comes to worse, and we hate to do that, especially when we're in these areas where water is at a premium, it's just, we have shortages of water, and yet the only way you can possibly help keep our pipes from freezing is to run the cold water a little bit. And the recommendation is usually to run it about the width of a pencil to let it continue to flow. It's going to be a lot of wasted water, but so hopefully you can just keep your building warm enough to not have to step into this last resort move on your part to keep your pipes from freezing. Protecting people is crucial. The slips and falls we get during the wintertime are numerous. And that's to keep prevent them, we need to make sure that we keep our parking lots and our sidewalks, steps, entrances all free from ice and snow buildup. Make sure we have the melting materials on hand and the shovels to take care of this. And make sure at your entrance you have non-slip floor mats. I sometimes will go into a facility and somebody has tossed down a towel to take up the water that's been tracked into either a room or even a main entrance. And wet towels are slippery. They're extremely slippery. So you want to make sure that's not the method you use. Some good non-slip floor mats will, if you're in an area where you're going to get rain, you're going to get some mud tracked in, make sure you always have non-slip floor mats present to pick that up. If you do get some wet floors, make sure you throw out your caution wet floor signs immediately. And just get the mops out there and take care of that right away. The longer it sits there, the more chance you have that somebody is going to slip and fall on it. Hanging icicles, I think we've all seen those. Some of them can get pretty big and they can get pretty dangerous. So we want to make sure that we don't let those build up and just kind of keep hanging overhead ready to come down and either hit an individual or a vehicle or something else and cause severe damage. Um, Basically, as we look at this, it's up to you. I mean, we do the seminars, we talk about what we can do to try and prevent frozen pipes and the winter losses and the importance of winterizing. But it's up to each facility to carry this to the level that's needed for the location, for the type of facility, for the weaknesses in the facility. If the heating is not real good, if it's an old building and air leaks through it a lot, um, you know your exposures and make sure that you set up appropriately to handle those exposures. Put the proper controls in place that are necessary, the shovels, the melting materials, the maintenance, the preventive maintenance, the cleaning of the gutters. Do all of that. And ultimately, when you look back at it, you'll get through the winter and say, wow, we did it. We didn't have any damage. We were able to continue to use this facility and experience those fruits of all of the labors that you put into ensuring that you've got a well-maintained facility and that you're ready for winter. There's a lot of internet sources out there that kind of prepare and let you know what's coming and how bad it might be storm-wise. I know we watch them year-round. We're sitting there and thinking, oh no, here comes another one. So you'll see there's some internet sources here you can go to look, and go to our website. We have links to at www.adventistrisk.org. You'll see links to some of these types of sites and other important sites on everything from emergency preparedness to just general safety items. So I hope you take advantage of the resources that are being offered. And we went through that fairly quick, but those were key important things.
Or really,
And
thank you.
did I hear David?
Hey, John. Um, just want to say thank you very much for the presentation. Seems like I've actually heard this one before, but you learn something new every time. They say that we're going to have a bit of a bad winter here, at least on the East Coast, and my it's been a lovely weekend here. But I tell you what, it is windy today and a bit chilly. So I'm guessing that is the sign of things to come. I don't see any questions at the moment. If anyone does have
Okay.
any questions, this would be a great time to type them in. And as you're doing that, I might just remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded and should be available within the week up on our website and our YouTube channel. So if you've missed it, or know of somebody who missed it or wanted to review it, you're welcome to um, look there a little later in the week. What I'd really love to encourage people to do, though, is please, please, please share the Solutions newsletter with the other ministry leaders in the church. As you'll notice, the Solutions newsletter and the webinars that we are doing in conjunction with that are for a variety of church ministry needs. Most of it, I think, is of great interest to a church safety officer or school safety officer. But oftentimes, there are other ministry leaders that would benefit greatly from the material as well. It's a free subscription, and all we do with your information is send you the newsletter and the webinar updates. So it's a resource for the Seventh day Adventist Church, and I would just want to share that with as many people as possible and maybe avoid some heartaches and disasters along the way. All right, well, it doesn't look like we're going to get any questions today. If anyone does think of something later, though, feel free to contact us on our website. I monitor the main contact us part of the website on a active daily basis. So just send us a note there, and we'll get back to you just as soon as possible. So I think I'm just going to say thank you, John. Really appreciate your
Thank
thoughts
you.
today, and I look forward to speaking with everyone next time.